Labor News Conference. Welcome to another edition of Labor News Conference, the public affairs program brought to you by the AFL-CIO. Labor News Conference brings together leading AFL-CIO representatives and ranking members of the press. Today's guest is Jacob Clayman, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO Industrial Union Department. Energy costs have been a major factor in the steep rise of consumer prices in recent years. Home heating, electricity, gasoline continue to shoot higher and higher, and the burden on consumers grows greater and greater. Last month, the Federal Power Commission gave the natural gas industry the go-ahead on a rate hike that could nearly triple gas prices for many families. A coalition of labor, consumer, and public interest groups joined in a lawsuit to block the new rate hike until the pending appeal from the order can be completed. Here to question Mr. Clayman about the coalition's objections to this and other rate hikes, why they believe the higher costs are not justified, and other consumer issues directly affecting American families across the nation are Ann McPheeters, consumer correspondent for the Scripps Howard newspapers, and Justin McCarthy, associate editor of Press Associates Incorporated. Your moderator, Charlie Hughes. And now, Ms. McPheeters, I believe you have the first question.
Mr. Clayman, the federal government says we're running out of natural gas and that in order to promote the production of more gas, we have to raise the prices. I have natural gas in my house, and I obviously don't want to pay more each month. But the government says that in order to keep being assured of an adequate supply, I'm going to have to. Why do you believe that the federal government is wrong in saying that we need an increase in the prices that consumers pay for gas?
I say it's wrong because the gas producers, meaning the great oil companies of America, are among those corporations that have the highest profits in the country. They don't need additional incentives. The assumption is that if we give them higher profits, meaning higher prices, they will develop new gas wells. It's never happened that way, either in oil or in gas. For example, all of us know that we pay more money for gasoline. It's been going up and up and up and up. Now, the natural assumption is, on the part of the administration, or has been, that if we paid more for gasoline, there would be an incentive on the part of the big oil companies to explore and create new supplies. The fact is that it hasn't happened. Also, the assumption is if we pay more, we're likely to use less, either oil or gas. In the area of oil, for example, we've paid more and we are using more gasoline now, even with the higher prices, than we used when the Arabs imposed their boycott, which means that the only institution, the only people who have profited from this, and I call it a ripoff, are the gasoline companies, excuse me.
Mr. Clayman, the appeals court has upheld the Federal Power Commission's decision to increase prices. You and a number of labor organizations and consumer groups have formed a coalition to try to block this increase. The appeals court has said the increase may go into effect right away, and yet you've called this a partial victory. Why?
Well, essentially what the appellate court has said was that it would prevent the new change in the price of gas. It would prevent it from going into effect immediately, and it cannot go into effect until the court has had further hearings. And so the victory is, at the moment, the temporary victory, and I hope the permanent victory, is that the court has said to the Federal Power Commission, you cannot institute the increased price, namely from the present 52 cents per thousand cubic feet to $1.42, you cannot institute it now. You must wait until we've had a full hearing.
Mr. Clayman, I noted that in addition to labor organizations in this coalition, there seemed to me to be some rather interesting other groups, and I wondered if you'd comment on them a little bit. The Consumer Federation of America, which is not a labor union or labor organization, the U.S. Conference of Mayors have joined with you in attempting to either hold down or hold back this increase in natural gas prices. Could you tell us a little bit about these other groups and how you managed to get together on this?
Well, you can add to that category that you've named farm groups. There are some, and state utilities commissioners. And so it's a broad coalition, essentially, of people who think in terms of consumers. They got together because they have the same kinds of interests, whether they're farmers, whether they're state commissioners, utility commissioners, whether they're trade unionists, whether they're consumers, so-called. They all are in the same bag, as it were, in relation to the cost of gas, and so a quite normal and natural coalition, almost by osmosis.
But Mr. Klayman, major industry groups have not supported your coalition. They say that it's more important that we have an adequate supply of gas, and they say that the coalition is wrong.
Well, I'm afraid that the industrial groups have a habit of sticking together, and this is the total answer. They too often do not think in terms of consumers, but they think in terms of profit,
But
and this is the answer.
They too would be paying higher prices, wouldn't they?
They too would be paying higher prices, but they can easily transfer those higher prices to the public, and we would have to pay their higher prices. Indeed, this is one of the ripple effects of increasing the cost of natural gas by 3 times. Not only would we feel it in the home, but we would feel it in all the products that we buy. For example, and I ought to throw out this figure very, very quickly. It's estimated, for example, that the change in the price level would mean $1.5 billion a year increase, and this is the figure of the Federal Power Commission. The American Public Gas Association, representing, for example, the consumers, say a $2.1 billion. I'm inclined to feel that their figure is closer than that of the FPC. And so we're dealing with vast sums of money that has enormous impact on the cost of living factor for millions of Americans.
Mr. Klayman, you speak of fairness, but isn't it true that the consumers who live in states where natural gas is produced already are paying 3 times higher prices than consumers who live in other states? For example, you say the price would be raised from 52 cents for 1,000 cubic feet to $1.42. But consumers who live in natural gas states already pay $1.55.
And do you know why they do that? Because there's no regulation in those states. The Federal Power Commission has no authority to regulate intra-state. They can only regulate in turn. I think this is a sad mistake. It's bad and sad for those who live in those states that are deregulated, and it's also sad for the rest of us who live in the regulated states, because there's almost a waste of gas in those states that are not regulated. And gas, of course, it's a national, natural source of energy, and it belongs to all the people, whatever the state. And so you point to a problem that deregulation has created already, because the states that pay 3 times have been deregulated, and we've been urging that they also be regulated, and they pay the same price, meaning 52 cents. If I may quickly make another point, and I hope I won't be talking too much. The Federal Power Commission, its own agencies, oddly enough, and people don't know this, its own agencies have advised the Federal Power Commission not to impose the rate that it has. And so, listen to this. The Bureau of Economics of the Federal Power Commission has recommended a rate of 56 cents per 1,000 cubic feet, as against the final rate imposed of 142. Its own Bureau of Natural Gas recommended 61.7 cents, as against the imposed rate of 142. And so its own technicians, its own experts, have already indicated to the Federal Power Commission that its analysis and its judgment is in error. But apparently it made no difference.
Mr. Kleiman, in connection with that, let me ask you this. The Federal Power Commission is a government regulatory agency. I don't think most of us know too much about it. I don't understand why this agency doesn't take into consideration the recommendations of its own technicians, plus taking into consideration the obvious consumer interests that are involved in this. Can you tell us a little bit about the Power Commission? What is it, and who names the people that serve on this commission?
The commissioners are designated, named by the president, and has to be approved by the Senate. Obviously, they normally are a reflection of the administrations, of the president's point of view. The President of the United States and the administration reflects the view of the Federal Power Commission and vice versa. And you can assume, as a matter of course, that the increase of 52 cents to $1.42 per 1,000 cubic feet is an extension of the policies of the administration. And so what I'm saying in answer to your very appropriate question is that these people in the main simply reflect the administration's attitude, which means that there are political considerations in coming to conclusions and issuing orders in the area of energy control or decontrol.
But Mr. Kleiman, isn't it a fact that we are running out of natural gas? And natural gas is now the cheapest form of energy. Why should I have natural gas in my house, but why should I continue to pay cheaper prices when my next door neighbor who has oil for his heat and is continuing to pay higher and higher prices?
It's no answer to our energy problems to suggest, and I know you're not doing this, but to suggest that because one form of energy is cheaper to obtain and distribute than another, that both should pay the same. Now, I would look forward to the day when we had an overall national policy on energy, which we really don't have, and maybe questions like yours will be answered. But in my judgment, I think it would be a feeble answer to our problems to suggest that all shall suffer equally. You see, because who gets the benefit of the contrary point of view? The oil companies, forgive me, the oil companies which own the gas resources in America, which own most of the coal resources in America, which now own a substantial portion of the uranium resources in America, they're the ones who will profit if we permit them to charge the same for gas that they now charge for oil.
But on the other hand, it's a matter also of competition, is it not? If the producers of natural gas, which is a clean energy, environmentally speaking, much more preferable than oil, which is basically dirty, and coal is dirty too. But if the producers cannot get enough natural gas, aren't they likely to stop producing natural gas and turn to the dirtier forms of fuel?
Well, I think there's a relatively simple answer, factual answer. Historically, in the gas industry, when rates were higher, it did not mean an increased supply of gas. It's the physical fact. If the implications of your question were were what I believe they are, then it would follow that if we had higher prices in the past, we'd have more exploration for gas. It hasn't happened. For example, in 1973, I think the prices had gone up, I don't know, 40-50% over 1969. During that period, we had some of the largest loss of our reserves, our gas reserves. And so there's been no relationship historically or even currently between higher prices and more exploration and therefore more gas. And there's another interesting little economic point. The shorter the supply of gas, the higher the prices. And it may very well be that the gas companies, the oil companies that own the gas companies, want to keep gas in short supply so that there'll always be a burgeoning, growing cost.
Mr. Kleiman, in connection with Ann's question about competition and the whole idea of what appears to me to be a monopoly control of our energy resources in this country, organized labor has been pushing for what's called divestiture, or breaking up of the big oil companies. Don't you think that this should include separating the natural gas industry from the oil industry, and perhaps in that way creating more competition?
Your basic assumption that there's no competition, serious competition, in any of the energy fields is as sound can be. And I think we've got to assume that as a basic assumption to begin with. In my judgment, and the judgment of the trade union movement, there should be a breakup to negate the kind of giantism that it's grown up. And the assumption is that if we can have competition, more competition, we're likely to get cheaper prices and more energy, and I believe that.
Mr. Kleiman, could we speak just a moment about conservation? You mentioned that gasoline prices being higher have not cut down on excessive use, but isn't it possibly true that if we continue to raise the prices of natural gas, that people will begin to think more and more about turning down thermostats and controlling their use, and possibly lead to a true conservation of energy in this country?
One of the elements, one of the facts that has created more conservation in America, as far as I can make out, has not come through price structure. It's been, for example, the 55-mile speed limit. That simple little governmental edict, sometimes indifferently enforced, has made the biggest single impact on the conservation of oil. Gas may or may not be in this area in terms of controlling its use. But what will happen really if you control prices, or decontrol prices, is that poor people, middle-income people, will carry the full burden of the problem. They will use less, because they can't afford to pay the prices. The rest of us will use as much or more as it suits our fancy.
Thank you very much. Today's Labor News Conference guest was Jacob Kleiman, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO Industrial Union Department. Representing the press were Justin McCarthy of Press Associates Incorporated and Ann McFeeters of the Scripps Howard newspapers. I'm Charlie Hughes, inviting you to listen again next week. Labor News Conference is a public affairs production of the AFL-CIO, produced in cooperation with the Mutual Broadcasting System.